First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this forum for having invited me to address you all. I presume that our gathering here today in Berlin is inspired by a common awareness that cultural diplomacy is one of the crucial fields in international diplomatic relations worldwide that has to be further developed in the future, because our future partly depends on it. Although I was not trained as a diplomat and international affairs are not directly related to my personal field of expertise, my activities on a daily basis as the president of a middle-sized university situated in the heart of Europe and surrounded by European decision-making institutions in Brussels sharpened my awareness considerably for two facts. First, that a huge and highly complex factory we call the European Union would never function properly without the oil of several different levels of diplomacy. And second, that those important diplomatic contributions most often function silently out of the view of public attention. This insight, however, comes accompanied by a set of more critical observations on our European future that will become the main focus of my contribution today. No problem. So I will catch up. Diplomacy presupposes a situation whereby two or more groups, two or more nations, two or more worlds are getting deeply interconnected, a situation that leads to the necessity of establishing channels that permit rapid and intelligent interchanges of information and strategy. This is not the place to get into general statements on diplomacy as such. However, in my view, the general public too often overlooks the fact that almost all the players in the game called diplomacy, as it is played in Brussels institutions, are in the first place expected to firmly stand for a specific identity. The identity of themselves, of the country they represent, an identity that most often determines the specificities and the character of their activities. It might be considered a substantial problem for the European project that those national identities still remained so robust and that all efforts to construct a strong common European identity are steadily undermined and weakened by all kinds of national interests. It is not my role to blame everyone or anyone here. However, in times where national revivals and separatist tendencies are gaining momentum through the old continent, it might be useful to understand the mechanism that rendered those national or regional identities so unassailable. Part of the answer might well be that those national identities are composed around a strong cultural component that is worth to be considered for a moment. It is undeniable and a valuable result in itself that the recognition of a common cultural heritage and throughout that of a common future has a strong unifying effect among the people that constitute a national or regional identity. However, the same mechanism most often also leads towards a conservative reflex whereby this specific complicity, this common cause, is considered as fragile and the surrounding world as potential dangerous. It is this conservative tendency that make people turn their back to all those that do not fit into the projection of the self as a group. And the isolation, as the American psychoanalyst Arno Gruen pointed out, splits up the self and leads to an attitude of exclusion towards the rest of the world. A form of exclusion that is highly culturally determined. In an open and globalized world where competition is tough and resources are limited, this evolution is worrisome. Now, even if the effects of this mechanism can be easily witnessed and analyzed at several places throughout the Union, as a citizen of Belgium and a rector of a Dutch-speaking university situated in the middle of a dominantly French-speaking Belgian capital, I am well placed to make this type of observations. It is my intimate conviction that the mechanism in itself is based on a paradox. Taking again my own country as a particular case, there can be no doubt about it that few of its components have a more efficient ability to reflect on the Belgian identity than the work of Van Eyck, Bruegel, Rubens, Ensor, of Broodtaarts, just to bring in mind a few of our famous masters in the visual arts. The paintings of Bruegel in particular seem to contain all the ingredients that constitute our specificity as an open-minded, joyful, and somehow rebellious little nation appreciated for its humor, surrealism, and culinary traditions. And yet, even if there might be some common sense in this type of general presumptions, it is nevertheless much more important to stress that all the artists we mentioned consider their work in the first place not as an echo of their Belgian identity, but as a contribution to a universal debate called painting. So those are the terms of the paradox I mentioned before. If on the local level, historical artworks such as Bruegel seem to perform well as generators of an idea of local identity that most often shows tendencies of cultural exclusion, we cannot deny that the same artworks also generate a totally different idea. Why wouldn't we try to go for a feeling of pride that is also related to our identity as Belgians, however, not because Marcel Broodtaarts belonged considerably to the same tribe as we do, but because he and many other Belgian artists succeeded in being taken seriously on the highest level in those global debates and were deeply influential in determining their course. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the message I want to bring from Brussels today. I presume we all agree that the globalization and the process of European unification changed our world and made us aware of threats and opportunities. It is therefore the task of our generation to redefine the notions of the global and the local, and to understand the changing tensions between them. It is in that sense that the role of cultural diplomacy will become increasingly important for the future development of the old continent. At the political, the academic, and the cultural level, we must face, consider, and even try to understand tendencies that lead to isolation and exclusion. However, at the same time, we must not stop stressing that innovation, originality, curiosity, knowledge, and a certain brand of stubbornness are the major assets within our European identity that will be crucial for the future. And this brings us to another important idea. The days that all European courts communicated in French are long gone. The same can be said of our worldwide cultural domination. Although the models of the Western avant-garde remain highly influential in other parts of the world, some peripheries in artistic creation became prominent during the last decades and are most likely about to develop into new centers for the creation of contemporary culture. China could serve as an example. However, throughout the whole region, an intensive activity can be witnessed on the cultural front. In Seoul, Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, Singapore, or Jakarta, and the days that those cities sent their gifted children to art schools in Brussels or Paris are far over. So the time has come to understand and accept that if we like to be part of a new global game in the making, that the primary conditions to do so are no longer the same. And that means that also we will have to move and to travel. It is therefore of great importance that new types of bridges will be constructed between Europe and those emerging countries and their cultural battlefields. It appears to me that by taking into account those new realities and by translating them into practice, we reach the heart of what cultural diplomacy is supposed to be. In the second part of my speech, I will offer you an insight into an excellent example of good practice in that sense, the model that understands itself an attempt to intertwine cultural and academic diplomacy was developed at my university. It is the Vrije Universiteit of Brussels. It is widespread common thought in circles of decision-making in Europe that education and cultural, in particular, are parts of the general budget that represent a major cost but have very little to offer in return. Our former king, Leopold II, was quoted for supporting this idea in a famous one-liner. La musique, c'est un bruit qui coûte cher, or music is an expensive type of noise. The project I'm going to present to you will offer, in opposition to that idea, a sharp illustration of the fact that no other fields of human activity are more appropriate to negotiate the image of who we are in the Far East than a well-entangled form of cultural and academic diplomacy, and that both fields more than deserve to be taken seriously. Since 2010, a Belgian team of academics, researchers, and artists headed by Hans de Wolf developed a new format for the implementation of cultural and academic diplomacy in a number of leading metropolitan areas in the Far East. After being charged by the government to reflect on how the image of Belgium in this economically fast-developing region could be established and improved, the team decided to make use on an experimental basis of a potential that has received far too little attention within Belgium itself, and that was remained as good as unknown abroad as Belgian potential. The international excellence of our contemporary artists in various disciplines, ranging from the visual arts to fashion, contemporary dance, and design. Deployed for the first time during the World Expo in Shanghai in the summer of 2010, the curator decided to present to the Chinese public a number of debates that were completely unknown in the country. Contemporary dance and transhumanism in science became the anchor points of an exhibition that shocked the Chinese art world and brought more than 20,000 visitors to an exhibition that lasted for less than 3 weeks. However, the originality of the developed formula consisted in the fact that the exhibition went accompanied by more than 20 activities ranging from public lectures and workshops to training sessions. The project even hosted a true symposium organized by European and Chinese physicists under the name of Einstein meets Margritte in Shanghai. In order to create the best possible working conditions, the team not only frequently intensively the local art world, they also established collaborations with Fudan University, Jiaotong University, and the China Art Academy in Hangzhou. And all those networks are still operational today. The new format has developed itself ever since as an efficient tool that enables us to reach very specific audiences in the whole region, China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam. Audiences that not only belong to the academic or cultural elites, the projects are also observed with curiosity by economic players. Belgian businessmen working in the region, of course, but also local economical elites. Belgian contemporary art gains popularity, and the secret of this success can most definitely be explained partly by the originality of the formula developed by the team, but would never have been conceivable without the necessary content. The international excellence of our Belgian art scene. Several other invitations would follow and brought our concept that consists in intertwining cultural and academic diplomacy to Seoul, Gwangju, Chengdu, Hanoi, and Hong Kong. And in each city again, the team deployed its peculiar grassroots methodology and succeeded in establishing excellent ties with renowned universities and the local world today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end by saying that I hope that I have shown that cultural academic diplomacy can indeed make a significant difference, or stated otherwise, how a rather small country as Belgium can be great in some aspects. I feel fortunate for having obtained the possibility to explain to you all that cultural diplomacy is not only a project for the future, a desire to realize, or a mere theoretical concept. I hope of having convinced you that in a world that is changing fast today, cultural diplomacy must be understood as an extremely important tool that will help to determine which place, which social groups will obtain around the table of the future. I am convinced that Europe has some excellent cards to play and has more than one joker in reserve. But we have to start to convince ourselves that it is our destiny to be around the table. And I am all the more satisfied today that I could come to you not only with a plan, not with a smart idea, but with the result of 4 years of concrete action on the fields. Ladies and gentlemen, cultural diplomacy, in my opinion, is a key to the future. Please accept it. Thank you very much.